Hi everyone, welcome to Legally Yours. Today we're here again with Nicole Davidson from Growing Beyond, and we're actually going to get to know a little bit more about what the commercial mediation process is actually made up of and what it involves. So thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.
Okay, so over to you. So as a client,
Yep.
I reach out, we're in this mediation process with you. Talk me through specifically what actually happens in the mediation process.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I think is the interesting question of how does the mediation itself start?
Yes.
Because often you've got a dispute. Let's assume it's a nice simple two-party dispute. Sometimes it's more complicated.
Yes.
And one of the parties will have thought about mediation, and sometimes the other party hasn't thought about it, or they haven't even communicated this idea. So often I'll be approached by a client who's just got a problem. They're talking to me about their problem, and they think mediation might be a solution. So often with that sort of situation, I'll have a chat, I'll get a little bit of an idea about the problem from that person's perspective. It's obviously only half of the story.
Of course, yeah.
And I'll talk to them about what my process looks like. I'll give them some hints either so that they can go and approach the other party to interest them in mediation.
Yes.
Or if they feel that their relationship has already got to a point where they're not talking to each other,
Yes.
sometimes I will be the person who calls the other party and says, look, I've been approached to mediate, I understand there's a dispute, and talk them through.
And do you find that that's quite successful? Do you find that often if you are able to approach it from an independent standpoint, because I can imagine there is probably a lot of friction in those initial stages, and being able to say, hey, listen, why don't we just at least get in a room and talk about what's going on here? Do you find that often that's the...
I think that ability to talk directly to the other party myself and explain it, because once again, the issue for something like this is that the mediator, myself in this case, has been selected by the other person. So there's a natural bias against me.
Yes.
So having that ability to call them and say, look, this is my role, this is why I'm calling you. This conversation is to figure out whether you would trust me to come into your issue and work with you.
Okay, fantastic.
It's really powerful.
It's amazingly powerful, and well done you, because I can imagine, like you say, you know that you're getting into that call and there's going to be some natural kind of mistrust happening there. So you get the parties in a room, let's say, what happens from there?
Well, so before I even get them in the room, I will sit down with each party individually. And the idea of that call, I'll call it a preliminary meeting, but I'm really trying to find out from each party to make sure that they fully understand what the dispute is about. Sometimes people know that they're upset, but they haven't actually thought through all of the reasoning about what's going on. So I want to make sure that they're clear as much as they can about all of the issues that have arisen that have led to this dispute. But more importantly, I want to start getting them to think about the future. So I use a fairly structured process based around negotiation theory to step them through, to really think about what's important to them, start getting them thinking about what might be important to the other person.
Yes.
If they haven't thought about that, they're not going to get to a resolution.
Yes.
Look at what happens if we don't settle, look at what sort of measurements. Is there any research we need to go out and do before we come into the room to try and solve this? Maybe we need evaluation, or maybe we need to go and have some other conversations with people. So what I want to do is have them as prepared as possible. So when we do then have our next step, which is coming into the room together, we've got everything that we need so we can make that conversation as successful as possible.
Wonderful. And I can imagine as well, like you say, it's already laying the seeds of what can we do in the future, and also understanding and educating them around if they don't resolve what then is likely to come ahead as well, so they can make educated decisions. And then once you're in that room and you're obviously, everyone's prepped and you're going through those issues, if they do reach an agreement, what actually happens then from there?
So this depends a little bit on the situation.
Of course.
I will work with the parties to actually get the nuts and bolts of what is it exactly that you are agreeing to.
Yeah.
Now, in some disputes, the parties have been able to have such a good conversation, the relationships pretty much come back to a positive state. Sometimes we will just document a list of those agreements in a fairly informal way, and the parties are comfortable with that. Other times we will need to do a more detailed document, and this would be normally where I would recommend that we bring the lawyers in.
Yes.
As a commercial mediator, even though I am legally trained, I don't give advice, I don't act for either of the parties, I'm completely neutral.
Yes.
So I will not give advice to make sure that the settlement document is binding, but I will encourage them to get lawyers to assist with that part of the process.
Fantastic. And it must be so rewarding from a personal perspective when you see two parties come in that, have kind of begin this sort of dispute, and then you're able to bring them back together. That must be really rewarding, and it keeps them out of the court process, which is a whole heap of time saved, a whole heap of money saved, and they can get on and most importantly get back to business.
And this is the point that I'm always raising for people, because sometimes you get quite embedded in those disputes. There's a lot of people will come in and go, it's the principle of the thing, but once you start to show them that the cost to them, not just financially but in stress, in time. One of my favourite sayings to people as we're thinking about a settlement is, what would it be like for you if you could put this aside and never have to think about this dispute again?
And I bet they...
And you can sometimes just see the eyes pop.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
That would be amazing.
Absolutely.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you for that. And if this is resonating with you and you'd like to explore more, head to our website at legallyyours.com.au. You can find Nicole Davidson from Growing Beyond there. Thank you so much for watching, and thanks for joining me, Nicole.
Thanks, Karen.